revealing your presence to the waker.
You failed to seduce the third wish.
The Djinn is one of those horror villains that looks simple on the surface. You might think he's just a killer genie who grants twisted wishes, which leads to, well, let's just say creative deaths. But the more you look at it closely, the stranger it gets. There's real mythology buried in this thing. I'm talking about ancient, unsettling mythology that most people who've seen the films probably never thought about. It grants wishes, sure, but the way it does it, the rules it operates under, the anatomy hiding beneath the human disguise, all of that points to something way more fascinating than just a campy horror villain. This creature has its origins rooted in actual folklore, and it also has a body horror side to it that doesn't get talked about nearly enough. So that's what this piece is about, where the Djinn actually comes from and why the rules that govern it make it so much creepier once you understand them. It's a proper deep dive, and trust me, this thing gets weird. Let's begin! Where did Wishmaster come from, and who created the Djinn? Alright, so before we even get into what the Djinn is in the movie, I think we need to talk about where Wishmaster actually came from. So Wishmaster came out in 1997, directed by Robert Kurtzman. And this is important because he is not just a director, he's one of the founders of KNB EFX. These are the guys behind practical effects in a lot of major horror films, and that shows here. And then you have Wes Craven attached as an executive producer, the same guy behind A Nightmare on Elm Street and Scream. You have all these horror actors showing up like Robert Englund, and what I like is that the film does not treat them like untouchable icons. It kinda does the opposite. It brings them in, and then lets the Djinn take them out. Like, these are the people who are usually the threat, and now they are the victims. But even with all of that, the movie never really reached that same level as something like A Nightmare on Elm Street did. It did well enough though. It got a sequel in 1999, and then 2 more films after that, finishing in 2002. Peter Atkins, who worked on Hellraiser, wrote the script, and this is the part I found really interesting. He didn't even like the idea at first. The whole evil genie concept just didn't work for him, which honestly I get, because it sounds like something that could go wrong very easily. But then he actually started looking into Djinn mythology. He was given these Xerox copies from books and encyclopedias, and some of them describe the Djinn as beings created after angels but before humans. And unlike angels who were given heaven and humans who were given earth, the Djinn weren't really given anything. And after digging into all of that, Atkins basically reworked the idea into something much more defined, which is the version of the Djinn we see in the film. What is a Djinn in real mythology, and how does Wishmaster differ? Now that we have that context, I think we need to talk about what a Djinn actually is outside of the movie, because this is where things start to get a little misleading if you only know the Wishmaster version. Because when most people hear the word genie, they already have a very specific image in their head. You think of something magical, something that grants wishes, maybe even something playful or helpful, depending on what you grew up watching. But that version isn't really accurate. The word genie itself actually comes from Djinn, and the original concept goes all the way back to pre-Islamic Arabia, and is also mentioned in the Quran. In those traditions, Djinn are considered as beings created from smokeless fire, making them a completely separate creation from humans and angels. They also have free will, which means they can be good, they can be bad, or they can simply live their own lives without interfering with humans at all. In most descriptions, Djinn are not even that interested in humanity. They're usually invisible. They live in their own communities, often in remote or desolate places, and for the most part, they prefer to stay out of human affairs, unless something brings them into it. So, this idea that they are constantly interacting with humans and granting wishes is not really part of the original concept. That comes later. A lot of that is tied to folklore and stories like 1001 Nights, where Djinn starts getting associated with lamps, wishes, and all of that, and over time, that version becomes the popular one, especially in modern media. But when you look at the film, the Djinn is not neutral. Instead of having freedom like in mythology, he exists in this void between worlds and can only interact with reality under very specific conditions. And the biggest change is the wish mechanic itself. In mythology, Djinn are not obligated to grant wishes. They might help, they might harm, or they might ignore you completely. There's no rule forcing them to do anything, but in Wishmaster that is completely flipped. Here the Djinn is bound to grant wishes. He has no choice in that, and instead of it being a gift, it becomes a system. What is the Djinn's true origin according to the film's Cosmology? The film basically lays it out in a very simple way. It says that when God created the universe, light gave birth to angels, earth gave birth to humans, and fire gave birth to the Djinn. And that one detail already changes the entire way you look at them, because they're not demons, they're not fallen beings, and they're not something that came later as a corruption of something good. They were created like this from the very beginning, which makes them feel less like a mistake and more like a parallel existence. But then the movie adds something else on top of that. The Djinn were never given a place of their own. Angels have heaven, humans have earth, but the Djinn are just left in this space between worlds. This isn't a punishment or a fall from grace, this is just how they were created. And if you think about it that way, it explains a lot about them, because they're not invading a world that belongs to them. They are trying to enter a world they were never allowed to have in the first place. Now, the Djinn we follow in the film is not some unique one-of-a-kind entity either. He's part of an entire race, but he's the one tied to this very specific prophecy, and that's where everything starts to come together. He cannot just appear in the human world whenever he wants. He needs someone to free him, and more importantly, he needs that person to start making wishes, because the whole system is built around that. Once he grants 3 wishes to the person who released him, that's when the barrier between worlds breaks, and that's what allows the rest of the Djinn to come through. At some point in the past, a sorcerer managed to imprison him inside a fire opal using a specific incantation, which is something designed specifically to contain him, which is why he cannot just break out on his own. How does wish granting actually work, and what are its rules? Alright, so now we need to talk about the wishes, because this is basically the entire point of the Djinn, and also the part that makes him so dangerous. It sounds very simple when you look at it, right? He just goes around granting wishes, but the way it actually works in the film is very different from what you expect. Because yeah, his powers are basically limitless. He can change reality, mess with how things work, bring objects to life, even create situations that shouldn't be possible. But he doesn't just use those powers whenever he wants. He needs someone to make a wish. He can't just act on his own and start doing whatever he wants. But it doesn't always work out well, because he does not care what you meant. He only cares about what you said. So if a wish is even slightly vague, he takes it in the most literal and extreme way possible. Like, there's a scene where a man in prison says he wants to walk through the bars, and the Djinn grants that exactly as said. The man does move through the bars, but his body gets forced between them and crushed in the process. And then there's another moment where someone says he doesn't want to see the Djinn anymore, and instead of leaving, the Djinn just removes his eyes. Sounds pretty gruesome, right? How powerful is the Djinn, and what can he do beyond wish granting? So let's step back from just the wish granting for a second and look at everything else the Djinn can do. He's not someone who can just be killed, he's immortal. He doesn't age, he doesn't get tired, and any damage you do to him just doesn't stick. You can shoot him, burn him, crush him, it doesn't matter. He recovers almost immediately. The only real way to stop him is by sealing him away. He can grant as many wishes as he wants to other people, and every single one of those comes with a cost. Every wish earns him a soul. And then there are the abilities he doesn't even need wishes for, like the way he takes human form. He actually peels the face off a corpse and uses it as a kind of mask, and once he has that, he can switch into that identity whenever he wants. He can also mimic voices, appear as someone familiar, and get into people's heads in a way that makes them more likely to make a wish in the first place. And that's the part that makes him even more dangerous, because he's not just reacting to wishes, he's creating the situations where people are going to make them. When it comes to the wishes, it is just saying the right things very carefully, because he understands intent. He knows what you mean, he knows what you actually want, and he still chooses to twist it in the worst way. So it's not like you can easily outsmart him just by being precise. He is already ahead of you. What are Djinn's weaknesses and how can he be stopped? It's time to look at how the Djinn can actually be stopped. You cannot kill him in a conventional way. Weapons do nothing. Physical damage doesn't matter. He recovers from it almost immediately, so trying to fight him head on is basically pointless. That's not how you deal with something like this. What actually works against him is very specific. First, he can be sealed again. The same way he was trapped in the fire opal in the first place, he can be sent back using the correct incantation. Then there is the idea of purity. The films establish that someone with a pure soul can resist him and ultimately defeat him. If he relies on twisting desire and exploiting weakness, then someone who doesn't fall into that pattern becomes a problem for him. And then there's his biggest weakness, which is not physical at all. It's his own rules. He has to grant wishes. He cannot refuse them, and he cannot ignore them. And if someone worded a wish carefully enough, he is forced to follow it exactly, even if it goes against him. How does the Djinn's fire-based biology work? Okay, so we already saw that the Djinn are created from fire in the movie. This isn't some random detail, but it shows clearly that his body is made to behave differently. He doesn't function like a human at all. There's no indication that he needs food, sleep, or anything to sustain himself. The clearest way you could see that he's different is from how he manages damage. He recovered almost instantly from it, but in the first film you can actually see that pain does affect him. He is essentially immortal, which means you cannot actually kill him through any conventional means. No matter what kind of damage he takes, his body recovers almost immediately. The only real way to stop him is not by destroying him, but by sealing him away again. What's Djinn's psychology? Is he truly evil or simply following his nature? Let's get into the part that I think makes the Djinn really interesting. Now, let me make it clear that I'm just sharing my thoughts here. If you guys don't agree, do let me know what you all think in the comments. I feel like more than doing things out of necessity, the Djinn actually enjoys it. And I feel like the movie also shows this when you watch him interact with people. He doesn't rush through wishes, he doesn't treat them like a task he has to complete. He takes his time, listens carefully, and there's this sense that he's actually having fun with how things turn out. And I remember noticing that especially in the way he speaks. He's very controlled, very articulate, almost theatrical at times. He sounds like someone who is completely comfortable with what he's doing. There are moments where it becomes very clear that he doesn't just want to complete the prophecy, he wants more than that. He wants to rise above everything else. Also, I kind of feel like he doesn't really hate the humans, he seems to be studying them. He listens to them, understands exactly what they want, and then uses that against them. There is almost a kind of curiosity there, like he finds humans interesting, but not in a respectful way. More like something to experiment with. He's choosing what to do very deliberately. Now, the question that kept coming back to me while I was looking at all of this was this, because if he was created the way the film describes, from fire, placed in a void, never given a world of his own, then maybe this is not something he became. Maybe this is just his nature. And I don't think the film gives a clear answer to that. There are moments, especially in the later films, where you see hints that he can feel something more, like attachment or even something close to affection, but that almost feels like an exception rather than the rule. Is he actually choosing to be like this, or is this just what he is? What is the fire opal, and what is its relationship to the Djinn's biology? We already talked a little bit about this a few minutes ago, so let me explain more. This gem is his prison, but it's also more than that. It's what keeps him contained, and at the same time it's where all the souls he collects are stored. So every time he grants a wish and takes a soul, that soul ends up inside the opal. They're not gone, they're trapped there. And that's important because the opal is not just holding him, it's holding everything he's taken. The way he gets trapped in it is also very specific. A sorcerer uses an incantation to seal him inside the stone, which means this is not something physical. It's something bound by rules. That's why he cannot just break out of it. He needs someone on the outside to release him, and once he's out, the connection does not go away. The opal is still tied to him. It continues to act as the place where souls are collected and contained, and it's also a part of how the larger goal works, because the more souls he gathers, the closer he gets to opening the gateway for the rest of his kind. What is Djinn's prophecy and why does it matter? Okay, we've already discussed a bit about the prophecy because this is basically the reason the Djinn does anything in the first place. Everything we see him do, every wish he grants, every soul he collects, all of it is tied back to this one goal. The Djinn is not just out there trying to cause chaos for no reason. He's following a system that was already set in place. According to the film, one Djinn is chosen to carry this out, and that's the one we're following. He has to be freed by a human, and then he has to grant 3 wishes to that same person. Once that happens, that's when the barrier breaks between worlds, and that's what allows the rest of the Djinn to enter. So everything builds toward that moment. And then there's the soul collection. In the first film, it's not clearly defined how many souls he needs, but in the second film, it's stated that he needs 1001 souls before everything can be completed. So while he's working towards those 3 wishes, he's also gathering power at the same time. What ultimately happens to the Djinn across the 4 films? Alright, so now let's talk about what actually happens across the films, starting with the first one because this is where everything is set up. The story begins in 1997 when a statue is accidentally broken during a construction project, and inside it is the fire opal. It ends up in the hands of Alexandra Amberson, who is an appraiser, and without really knowing what she is dealing with, she ends up awakening the Djinn. And the moment that happens, everything starts moving. He takes on a human form almost immediately entirely by using the face of a dead man and calls himself Nathaniel Demarest, and from that point on, he just starts working through people. He talks to people, listens to what they want, and then grants their wishes in ways that are technically correct, but completely destructive. So if someone asks for beauty, they get it, but in a way that traps them, and if someone wants money, it comes through something that ends up costing them their life. Every single wish follows that same pattern. And while all of this is happening, he's also building towards something bigger. His goal is to collect enough souls and then complete the 3 wishes of the person who freed him, because that's what allows the rest of the Djinn to enter the world. So all of these smaller interactions are really just steps toward that. But Alexandra eventually figures out how this works, and instead of trying to fight him directly, she uses the one thing that actually works against him, which is the rules. With her final wish, she reverses the moment he was freed, which resets everything and traps him back inside the opal before he can complete what he started. And that could have been the end of it, but the story doesn't stop there. In the second film, the opal is found again during a robbery, and a woman named Morgana becomes the one who releases him this time. He takes human form again and ends up operating inside a prison, which is the perfect setting for him because everyone there wants something. So he does the same thing again, granting wishes, collecting souls, and moving toward the same goal. But this time, there's a clear number attached to it. He needs 1001 souls to fully power what he's trying to do, and everything he does is focused on reaching that. Morgana eventually understands what's happening and approaches it differently. Instead of trying to outplay him directly, she makes a selfless wish that purifies her own soul, and that ends up disrupting his entire plan and sending him back again. Then when you get to the third and fourth films, things start to change a bit. The Djinn returns again through different people, but the tone shifts. In the third film, the conflict becomes more focused on external forces trying to stop him, and in the fourth, there's even an attempt to give him something closer to human emotion, which changes how he behaves. But across all 4 films, one thing stays consistent. He gets close every time, but he never actually wins, and it's always for the same reason. He's powerful, but he's bound by the rules, and every time someone understands those rules well enough, that's what stops him. Well, with that guys, we have come to the end of yet another video. Now, I want to hear more from you guys. What would you even wish for if you were in that situation? And more importantly, do you think it's even possible to outsmart something like the Djinn just by choosing your words carefully? Or would he still find a way around it? Also, do you think the Djinn is actually evil, or is he just doing what he was created to do? Let me know what you guys think in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more content like this. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.